Well, we've talked also a number of times about the collapsed walls of Jericho because obviously that's one of the most famous incidents in the whole Old Testament. Yeah. And obviously we see the walls are in fact collapsed. Mm-hmm. But do we know how they collapsed?
Yeah. Once you get the dates right, it's amazing how well the abundance of evidence at Jericho fits the Bible's narrative. So the big thing, of course, is the collapsed walls. What you find there is there's still, you can go there today and see at the southern end, there's kind of a stone wall surrounding the city of Jericho that's still present, but it's not a freestanding wall. It actually just holds in the earth. It's a retaining wall. And this is what the Israelites would have marched around. But on top of the stone wall was a freestanding wall made of red mud bricks. And that's what the archaeologists found, not still standing up, but all collapsed outward, fallen at the base, forming kind of a ramp up to the top of the stone wall. So once it fell down, the invading army could have marched straight up ahead of them into the city. And what's particularly fascinating is...
Before we continue, quick heads up, stick around until the end of the interview because for a limited time, we're offering an exclusive free stream of Keaton's powerful presentation, Archaeology Confirms the Bible. It covers a lot more of this info in even more depth. You won't want to miss it.
You know, an invading army would typically find a weak spot in the fortifications of a city and bash that in with battering ram, right? But in this case, the collapsed walls were found from different excavations all around the city, and they fell outward. And so this indicates it's not just an invading army. There was an army. Even Kathleen Kenyon thought it was attackers that burned the city. But first, the walls fell, and it must have been some other means. There are quotes by some archaeologists that don't believe it was Joshua who was responsible, and they say things like, we just don't know what happened to these fortifications. There seemed to have been an innate flaw in them. And we know the Bible tells us this was miraculous.
Right. Well, what other evidence is there for the biblical account of what happened to Jericho?
Yeah, the Bible is clear that Joshua burned only 3 cities. So again, unlike what archaeologists expected, that every place was destroyed, no, only 3 cities were burned. And there's almost nothing an archaeologist loves more than a fire. Because these frequently leave behind evidence of the ash, of the things that they burn and destroy. And we do find a 3-foot thick layer of ash at Jericho, lots of destruction debris, got to a very intense heat and so forth. And then do you recall how after that fire, Kathleen Kenyon said the city was abandoned? Well, it turns out that fits beautifully with the biblical narrative because Joshua laid an oath on the people not to rebuild the city. It was just to lay in ruins perpetually. And it was only at the time of King Ahab that someone rebuilt the foundation walls of the city of Jericho. And so this is what we find at the site. The city was abandoned afterwards, not rebuilt until centuries afterward.
Got it. So we have evidence of the walls collapsing for no explainable reason. We have evidence of a massive destruction and then no habitation at Jericho, which does fit perfectly with the biblical record. But let's talk about the character of Rahab. Can you tell us what happened with her and why it's significant?
Yeah, now that's particularly interesting because the Bible is clear that Rahab's house was built into the city wall. You remember the spies escaped through her window. That's how they got outside of the city. But the Bible also tells us that Rahab and her family were spared. They were to stay in their house until the walls fell down and the Israelites conquered, and then they were to come out and be safe. And so people have often wondered, how could Rahab and her family be spared? How come her house didn't fall down when the walls fell down?
Right.
It seems like maybe part of the city wall didn't collapse. And that is what a team discovered on the north side of Jericho. There were houses there built into the city wall, and part of the mud brick walls there didn't entirely fall down. The houses were still standing when they were excavated.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So aligning with the biblical account, we have a house, which could very well be Rahab's house, found in a section of the wall that didn't collapse and was kept safe throughout the destruction. If you'd like to hear more from Keaton about archaeology, we are offering a free stream of his lecture called Archaeology Confirms the Bible. What can you tell us about that?
Well, this was filmed at our most recent super conference, and it gives a broader overview than kind of the things we've been covering here. So it does deal to some extent with the conquest period, but also goes into other evidence from the time of the Exodus, from the time of King David. I think it mostly focuses on the Old Testament, but it also gets a bit into some of the New Testament archaeology, and there's abundant evidence there as well for things like the crucifixion of Jesus and the Pontius Pilate, his existence has been confirmed and corroborated and so forth. And so if people want just a good overview of how the evidence aligns with Scripture, that'd be a great place to start.
And we'll make that link available in the description.